Welcome to this explainer for General English 9, Unit 4, Lesson 6. Today we're focusing on determining the connotative meaning of words and using context as a clue to meaning. Think of this as building a highly transferable toolkit for cracking the code on unknown vocabulary. We're moving way beyond just guessing, and we're going to learn how to methodically break down the language we encounter in our everyday reading.
Okay, picture this familiar and, let's be honest, kind of frustrating classroom exchange. A teacher asks, "How did you figure out the meaning of that word?" And the student proudly goes, "I used context clues." But then, when pressed to explain exactly which clues, the student just reads back the entire sentence, right? We have literally all been there. It's so easy to drop the phrase context clues because we hear it all the time in school, but without specific actionable tools, it's really just an empty phrase. Well, today, we're going to fix that.
So here is our objective. We're going to master unknown words through context clues, connotation, pronunciation, and etymology. Basically, by the end of this explainer, you'll have a complete set of strategies to decode pretty much any unfamiliar text. Let's dive right into our first tool, context clues. Now, when you're reading complex texts, you're inevitably going to hit a roadblock with an unknown word. It happens to everyone. But determining its meaning isn't just about staring at the sentence and reading it again. It actually requires a specific mental action called making an inference. An inference is basically an educated deduction based on the word's surroundings. You're looking at the neighborhood the word lives in, and you're using the clues the author deliberately left behind to deduce its exact identity. The absolutely crucial point here is that you don't just guess blindly. You can use the IDES acronym to systematically hunt for those immediate clues. IDES stands for inference, definition, example, antonym, and synonym. Let's say you come across a tricky word like meticulous. You can scan the surrounding text. Does the author provide a direct definition right after it? Do they give an example of someone acting meticulously? Maybe they use an antonym, contrasting it with someone who's just sloppy or careless. Or perhaps they use a synonym, pairing it with a familiar word like careful. Using this specific strategy literally turns you from a passive reader into an active word detective. But hey, what happens when context clues just aren't enough? Well, that's when we turn to the formal database of the language, the dictionary. And honestly, the dictionary offers so much more than just a basic definition. Take pronunciation, for example. You'll often find it written in two distinct ways. First, you have the orthographic spelling, which relates to the standard letters, like orthographic. Then, you have the phonetic spelling, which tells you exactly how it sounds to the human ear, like phonetic. And of course, if you're using a modern digital dictionary, you're going to see that incredibly handy little audio playback icon. Honestly, clicking that is sometimes the absolute fastest way to learn how to say a new word out loud with total confidence.
Dictionaries also provide these really helpful italicized usage labels. These act as powerful hints to help you determine a word's connotative meaning. That's its emotional or cultural weight, and the appropriate setting for its use. For instance, if you see the label slang, you instantly know the word is highly informal. Think of the early 19th century slang word absquatulate, which basically means to abruptly leave. If you see archaic, it means the word was once super common but is now pretty rare, like gadzooks. Or you might see the label non-standard, which gets applied to words like conversate. These labels are huge. They tell you not just what a word means, but the tone it carries and whether you should be using it in a formal academic essay or just casually hanging out with friends.
And speaking of word history, this brilliantly illustrates our next tool, etymology, or the study of word origins. Understanding where a word came from can often unlock its current meaning in a way that a basic, standard definition just can't. Take a look at the timeline for the word cop. It didn't just magically appear out of thin air. It actually evolved from the old French word caper, which meant to seize or to take. Over time, as language naturally shifted, it transformed into the modern slang term for a police officer. And why is that? Because police officers seize criminals. Tracing that historical line really connects the dots in your brain, making the word's true meaning totally unforgettable. Now, this brings up a really fascinating question, mainly because a lot of people have some, well, awkward ideas about how dictionaries actually work. Take a second and think about this. Does a non-standard dictionary label mean a word is simply wrong? Like, if a teacher or a textbook tells you a word is non-standard, should you just strike it from your vocabulary entirely? Well, here's the truth. The dictionary records language use. It does not regulate it. Basically, the dictionary is a historian, not a police officer. So a non-standard label doesn't actually mean a word is fundamentally wrong. It just means it has currency in reputable contexts, even if it's disapproved of by some language purists out there.
Similarly, when you look up a word, the very first definition listed isn't always the most correct one. Sometimes dictionaries list senses chronologically, starting with the absolute oldest meaning, and sometimes they put the most common meaning first. Understanding this makes you a much savvier, much smarter user of the dictionary.
Okay, let's jump into a quick scenario and see how this builds your new skills. Imagine you're working on an assignment and you encounter a word that just feels completely alien. You understand its basic, bare-bones definition, but you really want to know its backstory to grasp its deeper connotation. So, if you needed to trace the historical origins of a word to better understand its current meaning, which specific dictionary tool from today's toolkit would you use?
If you said etymology, you hit the nail right on the head. You are absolutely correct. By looking up a word's etymology, you can perfectly connect its ancient, original meaning to its modern definition. Exactly like we did with the word cop coming from the Old French caper. Honestly, it is one of the most fascinating ways to truly deepen your vocabulary. So let's quickly recap our required concepts for today. Your new word detective toolkit is fully stocked and ready to go. First, you've got the idea strategy to systematically hunt for context clues. That's inference, definition, example, antonym, and synonym. Second, when you do need to consult the dictionary, you know exactly how to locate and understand both orthographic and phonetic pronunciations. Third, you know to keep an eye out for those italicized usage labels to figure out a word's connotative meaning and overall tone. And finally, you know how to explore etymologies to uncover the fascinating history behind the language.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. The true power of this toolkit isn't just knowing that it exists, it's actually using it out in the wild. So, the next time you face a really difficult reading assignment and hit a word you just don't know, which specific clue from your new ideas toolkit will you deliberately look for first to crack the case before you ever even reach for a dictionary? Keep that question in mind, apply these tools, and watch your reading comprehension absolutely soar. Thanks for joining me today, and happy reading.